I opened my front door to find my daughter measuring my dining room for her new office furniture. Her husband stood there with a contractor, discussing which walls they would knock down first. When I asked what was happening, Addison looked at me with that fake sympathetic smile and said, "Come on, Mom. You know you cannot handle this big house anymore. We are just getting ready for when you move to Sunset Manor." They weren't waiting for me to agree. They were already planning my exit. But here is what they didn't know. I would already started planning their surprise, and by the time they realized what I would done, their dreams of inheriting everything had turned into a legal nightmare they would never escape. Hey everyone, before we dive into this story, please hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss content like this. Also, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from. I love hearing from viewers around the world. Thanks for being here. My name is Dorothy Henderson, and at 68 years old, I thought I would seen every kind of heartbreak life could offer. I was wrong. Last Monday, I returned from my weekly grocery run to Albertsons, the same trip I have made every Monday for 15 years since George passed, carrying 2 bags of essentials and wondering why my daughter's Honda was parked in my driveway at 10 in the morning. Addison usually only visited on holidays or when she needed something, and her husband Peter never came along unless they were delivering bad news. I pushed through my front door, expecting maybe they would stop by to fix the squeaky hinge Addison always complained about. But instead, I heard unfamiliar voices coming from my living room. Deep voices, professional sounding, discussing square footage and renovation costs like they were already homeowners. "The kitchen island could definitely go," Addison was saying, her voice carrying that bright, fake enthusiasm she used when she was lying. "And these cabinets are so outdated. We will want to gut the whole thing." I set my groceries down quietly and peered around the corner. There was Addison in her expensive yoga outfit, gesturing dramatically at my breakfast nook, where George and I had shared coffee every morning for 37 years. Peter stood beside her, wearing his usual constipated expression, and between them was a man in khakis holding a tablet and nodding like everything they said made perfect sense. The contractor, because that is clearly what he was, pointed toward the wall where I keep my mother's china cabinet. "This whole section is non-load bearing, easy removal. You could open up the entire space." "Perfect," Peter said, actually clapping his hands together. "Addison's been wanting a home office forever, and this room gets incredible natural light." That is when I stepped into view, still holding the car keys, still wearing my old winter coat. The conversation stopped like someone had hit a mute button. Addison recovered first, her face shifting into that concerned daughter expression she would perfected over the years. "Oh, Mom, you are back early. We were just looking at some options." "Options for what?" I asked. Though I already knew the answer was going to make me sick. Peter jumped in before Addison could speak, which was never a good sign. "We have been researching assisted living facilities, Dorothy. Some really nice places with activities and meal programs. Addison found this great community center where you could make friends your own age." The contractor looked uncomfortable now, glancing between us like he was witnessing a family intervention gone wrong. "I see," I said slowly. "And you needed to measure my house because—" Addison's fake smile wavered. "Mom, be realistic. This place is way too big for one person. You could fall down those stairs, or forget to turn off the stove, or have a medical emergency with no one around. We are just being responsible." Responsible. Like they were doing me a favor by planning my eviction. I nodded politely and excused myself to put away the groceries, but really I needed a moment to process what I would just witnessed. They weren't suggesting I move, they were planning it. The contractor wasn't giving estimates for future renovations, he was measuring for immediate ones. When I came back to the living room, they were huddled around the tablet looking at floor plans. The contractor was gone, probably sensing the family drama and deciding he didn't need the headache. "So when exactly were you planning to discuss this with me?" I asked. Addison and Peter exchanged one of their looks, the kind married couples develop when they have rehearsed a conversation ahead of time. "We are discussing it now," Addison said gently, like she was speaking to a confused child. We just wanted to have some information ready so we could present you with real options instead of vague ideas." "How thoughtful," I said. "And these real options, do any of them involve me staying in my own home?" Peter shifted uncomfortably. "Dorothy, you have to understand our position. We worry about you constantly. Every time the phone rings late at night, we think something's happened. Wouldn't it be easier for everyone if you were somewhere safe, with trained staff and emergency buttons? Easier for everyone, meaning easier for them to stop worrying about their inheritance and start accessing it." I told them I would think about their suggestions, walk them to the door with the same pleasant smile I would been using to get through uncomfortable situations for 7 decades, and watch them drive away in their leased Honda, probably planning their next conversation with the contractor. Then I went to my bedroom, opened the little jewelry box where I keep things that matter, and pulled out the digital voice recorder George bought me 3 years ago when I mentioned wanting to record family stories for posterity. I would never used it, but suddenly it seemed like the most important purchase he would ever made. That night, I called my neighbor Ruth. She is 74, sharp as a tack, and the only person I know who has survived her own children trying to control her life. We met for coffee the next morning at the diner on 5th Street, and I told her everything I would seen and heard. Ruth listened without interrupting, stirring her coffee with the methodical patience of someone who had been through this herself. When I finished, she reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "Call him today," she said, "not tomorrow." Today, his name is Lucas Warren, and he specializes in elder law. He helped me when my son tried to get power of attorney behind my back. The card was simple, professional, with an address downtown. I called from the diner parking lot. Lucas Warren's voice was calm, professional, and reassuring. He didn't talk to me like I was a confused old woman making problems out of nothing. He talked to me like a client who had legitimate concerns about people trying to take advantage of her. "Document everything," he told me. "Every conversation, every visit, every piece of paper they ask you to sign, and don't sign anything without calling me first that afternoon." I made sure the voice recorder was charged and ready. I had a feeling I wouldn't have to wait long for my next opportunity to use it. I was right, Addison called that evening, her voice bright with false cheer. "Hi, Mom. Peter and I were thinking we could come over this weekend and help you start going through some of your things. You know, just to make the transition easier when the time comes." "What transition?" I asked innocently. "Well, you know, the move we discussed. To the assisted living community." I don't remember agreeing to any move. There was a pause. "Mom, we talked about this yesterday. You said you would think about it." Thinking about it and agreeing to it are two different things. Addison. Her tone shifted slightly, losing some of its artificial sweetness. "Mom, you are not being realistic about your situation. This house is too much for you to handle alone. We are trying to help. I appreciate your concern," I said, making sure the recorder was running. "But I am perfectly capable of managing my own home." "Are you, though?" Peter's voice came from the background, probably on speakerphone. "What about last month when you forgot to pay the electric bill?" I hadn't forgotten to pay anything. The electric company had switched to online billing without telling me, and it took 2 phone calls to straighten out. But clearly they would filed it away as evidence of my declining mental capacity. "Or when you got lost driving to the grocery store," Addison added, another lie. I would taken a different route because of construction and arrived 10 minutes later than usual. Addison had been visiting that day and panicked when I wasn't back at exactly the expected time. I began to understand that they would been collecting these moments, building a case against my competence, one exaggerated incident at a time. "I think I am managing just fine," I said evenly. "Mom." Addison's voice had that patient, condescending tone adults use with stubborn children. "We have already put deposits down on a couple of places, nice places, with activities and meal plans. We just need you to tour them so you can choose which one you prefer." Deposits. Plural. They would already started spending money on my eviction. "I see," I said, "and if I don't prefer any of them?" The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if we would been disconnected. Finally, Peter spoke up. "Dorothy, we are trying to do this the easy way. But if you are not willing to be reasonable, we might have to explore other options." Other options? Legal options? Competency, hearings, medical evaluations? I could hear the threat in his voice as clearly as if he would written it out. "Well," I said cheerfully, "I certainly appreciate you both looking out for me. Why don't you come over this weekend and we can discuss it further?" After I hung up, I played back the recording. Every word was clear, including Peter's thinly veiled threat and Addison's admission that they would already made financial commitments based on decisions I hadn't agreed to. I made 3 copies of the file and hid them in different locations around the house. Then I called Lucas Warren again. The next few days passed normally on the surface. I did my grocery shopping, attended my book club, watered my garden, and maintained the same routine I would followed for years. But underneath, I was preparing for war. I started by making a list of every asset I owned. The house, obviously, but also my late husband's life insurance money, sitting untouched in a savings account, my mother's jewelry, the antique furniture George and I had collected over the years, the classic car in the garage that Peter had been eyeing since the funeral. Then I started making phone calls, to the bank, to my insurance company, to the county clerk's office, just gathering information, I told them, just wanting to understand my options. What I learned made my blood run cold. Addison had already been to the bank, asking questions about my accounts. She would presented herself as my concerned daughter, worried about my ability to manage my finances. The bank representative had been professional, but had clearly taken notes about the conversation. Peter had called my insurance company, inquiring about the process for transferring property in cases of mental incompetence. They were building their case methodically, creating a paper trail that would support their narrative of a declining old woman who needed their intervention. But they would made one crucial mistake. They would started their campaign before getting me officially declared incompetent, which meant I still had full legal control over my assets, and I still had time to protect myself. Saturday morning came with a light rain that made everything look gray and melancholy. Perfect weather for the conversation I was about to have. Addison and Peter arrived promptly at 10, armed with printed information about assisted living facilities and what looked like a folder full of legal documents. Addison carried a box of tissues, probably expecting tears and emotional manipulation to be part of their strategy. I greeted them warmly, offered coffee, and settled into my favorite chair, the one positioned perfectly to catch everything on the hidden voice recorder I would placed on the bookshelf. "We brought some brochures," Addison said, spreading glossy pamphlets across my coffee table. "These are the 3 facilities we think would be the best fit for you." I picked up the first brochure. Sunset Manor, the same place they would mention during their contractor meeting. The monthly cost was more than my house payment had ever been. "This is expensive," I said mildly. "Well, yes," Peter said, leaning forward like he was explaining basic economics to a child. "Quality care costs money. But that is what your savings are for, right? And once we sell the house, there will be plenty to cover the monthly fees." Once we sell the house, not once I decide to sell it. Once they sell it, I see, I said. And who exactly would handle the sale? Addison and Peter exchanged another one of their rehearsed looks. "We would, Mom. We have already talked to a realtor about market values and staging. Peter has experience with real estate from his job, so it just makes sense for us to handle the details." "How convenient," I said. "And where would the proceeds from the sale go?" "Into an account for your care, obviously," Addison said. But something in her voice suggested that wasn't the complete truth. "We would manage it for you. Make sure all your bills get paid. Make sure you have everything you need. They would manage it for me." Meaning they would have complete control over the money. George and I had spent 40 years accumulating. I picked up the second brochure. Golden Years Community Center. Even more expensive than the first one. "These places all seem very costly," I said. "What happens if the money runs out?" "Oh, that will not happen for years," Peter said quickly. "And by then, well, you know, things change. By then, I would be dead." was what he meant. By then, their financial management of my assets wouldn't matter because there wouldn't be anything left to manage. Addison pulled out the folder of documents. We brought some paperwork that might make things easier. Just basic stuff, power of attorney, medical directives, that kind of thing. If you sign these now, we can handle all the arrangements without bothering you with every little detail. I took the papers and pretended to read them carefully, though I would already decided I wouldn't sign anything. The power of attorney document was particularly interesting. It gave them complete control over my finances and medical decisions, effective immediately, not just in case of future incompetence. This seems very comprehensive, I said. I think I would like to have my lawyer review it before I sign anything. The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Your lawyer? Addison asked. Mom, you don't need a lawyer for this. We are family. We are trying to help you. I am sure you are, I said pleasantly. But these are important documents. I would just feel more comfortable having someone explain them to me. Peter's jaw tightened. Dorothy, we are not trying to trick you. These are standard forms that everyone uses for estate planning. Then you will not mind if I have them reviewed. But we have already scheduled tours at these facilities, Addison said, her voice rising slightly. We told them you would be making a decision soon. Well, I guess you will have to call and reschedule. The silence that followed was thick with frustrated anger. I could practically see them recalculating their timeline, trying to figure out how to pressure me into compliance without looking like the greedy manipulators they were. Finally, Peter stood up. We are just trying to do what is best for you, Dorothy. But if you are going to be difficult about it, maybe we need to explore other options. There was that phrase again. Other options? What kind of other options? I asked innocently. Addison shot Peter a warning look. But he was too angry to be subtle. Well, if you are not capable of making rational decisions about your own welfare, there are legal processes for that. Competency evaluations. Court-appointed guardians. We would rather not go that route, but if you force us, he let the threat hang in the air like a dark cloud. I nodded thoughtfully. I see. So if I don't voluntarily agree to move out of my home and hand over control of my assets, you will try to have me declared mentally incompetent. It is not like that, Addison said quickly. We are just worried about you making decisions that aren't in your best interest. Decisions like wanting to stay in my own home and manage my own finances. Mom, you are being paranoid. Paranoid. The magic word that dismissed any concerns I might have as symptoms of mental decline. I stood up slowly, using my age as camouflage for the rage that was building in my chest. I think I need some time to consider everything you have told me, I said politely. Thank you for bringing the information. They tried to push for more commitments, more signatures, more immediate action, but I held firm. I was tired, I told them. I needed to rest. I would call them after I would had time to think. After they left, I sat in my chair for a long time, staring at the brochures they would left behind. 3 facilities, all expensive, all far enough away that casual visits would be inconvenient. They would chosen carefully, looking for places that would isolate me from my support network while draining my assets as quickly as possible. But they would also given me something valuable, a clear recording of their threats, their timeline, and their plan. I had Peter on tape threatening legal action if I didn't comply with their demands. I had Addison admitting they would already made commitments using my money without my consent. I called Lucas Warren and scheduled an emergency appointment for Monday morning. Then I went to my bedroom and opened the secret compartment in my jewelry box. The one George had installed years ago when he was worried about break-ins. Inside was a small key that opened a safety deposit box downtown, the one Addison didn't know about. It was time to start moving my assets somewhere safe. Monday morning, I sat in Lucas Warren's office wearing my best dress and carrying a folder full of evidence. The recording device, printed bank statements, copies of the threatening documents Addison and Peter had brought, and a detailed timeline of every suspicious conversation and incident from the past 2 weeks. Lucas listened to the recordings with the focused attention of a surgeon examining X-rays. When they finished, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "Mrs. Henderson," he said, "what you are describing is a textbook case of attempted financial elder abuse. Your daughter and son-in-law are following a very predictable pattern. Isolate the victim, question their competence, gain control of their assets, and profit from the situation." "Can they actually have me declared incompetent?" I asked. "They can try," he said. "But based on these recordings, any judge would see right through their motivations. You are clearly articulate, rational, and fully aware of what is happening to you. Their threats actually work in your favor, because they demonstrate that this isn't about your welfare, it is about money." He pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. "Here is what we are going to do," he said. "First, we are going to establish a trust to protect your assets from any future claims. Second, we are going to document their behavior and file a restraining order if necessary. Third, we are going to make sure you have updated estate planning documents that reflect your actual wishes, not what they think your wishes should be." "How long will this take?" "For the trust, we can have the paperwork ready by Thursday. For the rest of it, we will move as quickly as possible. The key is to establish protection before they escalate their tactics." I spent the next 3 days moving money, updating beneficiaries, and basically building a legal fortress around everything I owned. Lucas helped me transfer the house into an irrevocable trust that would protect it from creditors and greedy relatives. My savings went into accounts that required 2 signatures for any withdrawals. Mine and Lucas's most importantly. I updated my will. Addison had been my primary beneficiary since her father died, but that was when I still thought she loved me more than she loved my money. The new will left her exactly $1, enough to prove I hadn't forgotten about her, but not enough to make her rich from my death. The rest went to charities, with a special provision for my local library to create a reading program for seniors. Thursday afternoon, I got a call from Addison. "Mom, we need to talk." "Can we come over tonight?" Her voice had a new edge to it, less fake sweetness and more barely controlled frustration. "Of course, dear," I said. "I will put on some coffee." They arrived at 7 of the clock sharp, but this time they weren't alone. They brought a woman in a business suit who introduced herself as Dr. Patricia Williams, a geriatric psychiatrist who specializes in cognitive assessments. I felt my heart rate spike, but I kept my expression neutral. They were accelerating their timeline, probably because they would sensed my resistance and decided to force the issue. "Mom," Addison said, settling onto my couch like she was preparing for a difficult conversation. "We are worried about you. Some of the things you have said lately, the way you have been acting, we think it might be good for you to talk to Dr. Williams." Dr. Williams smiled professionally. "Mrs. Henderson, I want you to know that this is just an informal chat. Your family is concerned about some changes they have noticed in your behavior, and they asked me to stop by and see how you are doing." "What kind of changes?" I asked. Addison jumped in before the doctor could answer. "Well, you have been very suspicious lately, paranoid. Even you think we are trying to trick you or take advantage of you, which is just. It is not like you, Mom. You have always trusted us before." "And the confusion about the legal documents," Peter added. "Normal people don't need lawyers to review basic estate planning forms. That kind of suspicious thinking can be a sign of cognitive decline." Dr. Williams nodded, sympathetically. "Sometimes families notice changes before the patient does. It is nothing to be ashamed of. Aging affects everyone differently." I realized I was watching a carefully orchestrated performance. Dr. Williams wasn't here for an objective assessment. She was here to provide professional validation for conclusions they would already reached. "I see," I said calmly. "And what would happen if you decided I was having cognitive problems?" "Well, the first step would be a formal evaluation," Dr. Williams said. "If that indicated significant impairment, your family might need to consider guardianship options to make sure you are safe and properly cared for." Guardianship, the legal mechanism that would strip away my rights and hand them over to Addison and Peter. "How interesting," I said. "And who would pay for this formal evaluation?" "Your insurance should cover most of it," Dr. Williams said. although there might be some out-of-pocket costs, and if I refused to participate. The room went quiet. Addison and Peter exchanged their familiar look, and Dr. Williams shifted uncomfortably. "Well," the doctor said carefully, "if family members have serious concerns about someone's safety, there are legal processes that can be initiated even without the person's cooperation." So there it was. The threat was out in the open now. Submit to their evaluation and let them declare me incompetent, or they would use the legal system to force me into compliance. I stood up slowly, using my cane for effect, even though I didn't really need it. "Dr. Williams," I said politely, "I appreciate you taking the time to visit with me tonight. However, I am going to have to decline your services." Her professional smile faltered slightly. "Mrs. Henderson, I really think it would be beneficial for you to, I am sure you do." I interrupted gently. "But I am quite satisfied with my current physician, and if I felt I needed psychiatric care, I would seek it through my own healthcare provider." Addison stood up too, her face flushed with anger. "Mom, you are being unreasonable. We are trying to help you. I understand, that is what you believe," I said, "but I am comfortable with my current situation." Peter's mask slipped completely. "Dorothy, you need to understand something. We are not asking for your permission anymore. We are telling you what is going to happen. You can cooperate and make this easy for everyone, or you can fight us and make it difficult. But one way or another, changes are going to be made." "What kind of changes?" I asked. "The kind that protect you from yourself," Addison said, "starting with getting you proper medical care and ending with getting you into a safe living environment." I nodded thoughtfully. "I see. And my opinions about what I want don't factor into these changes. Not if your opinions are based on paranoid delusions and cognitive impairment," Peter said bluntly. Dr. Williams looked uncomfortable now, probably realizing she would walked into a family coup rather than a concerned intervention. "Well," I said, "I think this conversation has been very enlightening. Dr. Williams, thank you again for your time. Addison, Peter, I will certainly give some thought to everything you have said." After they left, Dr. Williams practically fleeing to her car, while Addison and Peter lingered on my porch making more threats. I called Lucas Warren. "They brought a psychiatrist to my house," I told him. "They are trying to build a case for incompetency. Did you submit to any testing?" I refused. "Good. How did they react? With threats?" "Peter basically told me they weren't asking for my permission anymore." "Even better. Did you record it?" "Every word." "Mrs. Henderson," Lucas said, "tomorrow morning I am filing for an emergency restraining order. What they did tonight constitutes elder abuse, and I have enough evidence to prove it. They have escalated this into a legal matter, so we are going to respond legally." "What does that mean for me?" "It means you are going to be safe, and they are going to be very sorry they tried to intimidate you." The restraining order was granted Friday afternoon. Addison and Peter were prohibited from contacting me, visiting my home, or interfering with my medical care. The judge reviewed the recordings and declared them troubling evidence of attempted exploitation of a vulnerable adult. But the real blow came when Robert filed a civil lawsuit against them for attempted fraud and elder abuse. The lawsuit included transcripts of all their recorded conversations, financial records showing their unauthorized inquiries into my accounts, and testimony from Dr. Williams about the suspicious nature of the evaluation they would arranged. Addison called that evening, screaming into my voicemail about how I was destroying the family and ruining their lives. Peter left 3 messages threatening to fight the restraining order and prove I was mentally incompetent, all of which just provided more evidence for Robert to add to our case. The next 6 months were the most peaceful I would experienced in years. Without the constant pressure and manipulation from Addison and Peter, I felt like I could breathe again. I joined a new book club, started volunteering at the library, and even took a watercolor painting class at the community center. Lucas kept me updated on the legal proceedings. Addison and Peter had hired their own lawyer, but their case was falling apart. The recordings were damning. The financial records showed clear evidence of their intentions, and Dr. Williams had ultimately refused to testify on their behalf after reviewing the full context of her visit to my home. In the end, they settled out of court. They agreed to drop any claims against my competency in exchange for me dropping the elder abuse charges. The restraining order remained in place, and they were required to attend counseling about appropriate boundaries with elderly family members. I never heard from them again directly, though Ruth told me she would seen Addison at the grocery store a few months later, looking tired and defeated. Apparently, their plan to finance their dream house renovation with my assets had collapsed along with everything else. The house I would almost lost remained mine. The money they would wanted to manage stayed under my control. The life they would try to dismantle continued on my terms. But the biggest victory wasn't legal or financial. It was personal. I learned that I was stronger than I would thought, smarter than they would assumed, and more capable of protecting myself than anyone had given me credit for, including me. 6 months after the restraining order was granted, I did something that would have horrified Addison and Peter if they would known about it. I bought a smaller house in a retirement community across town. Not because I was forced to, not because anyone pressured me, but because I wanted to. The new place had modern safety features, a maintenance staff that kept everything in perfect condition, and neighbors who became genuine friends rather than sources of worry and obligation. I sold my old house for far more than Addison and Peter had estimated, and invested the proceeds in a way that would ensure my financial security for the rest of my life. I kept one small memento from the whole ordeal: the voice recorder that had captured their threats and manipulations. Not as a reminder of their betrayal, but as a reminder of my own strength. Sometimes I get letters from other elderly people who have heard my story through the legal community or senior advocacy groups. People dealing with their own manipulative relatives, their own fears about aging and vulnerability, their own struggles to maintain dignity and independence in a world that often sees older adults as problems to be managed rather than people to be respected. I always write back. I tell them about the voice recorder, about documenting everything, about finding good legal help before the crisis escalates. Most importantly, I tell them that they have more power than they realize, even when everyone around them is trying to convince them otherwise. Addison and Peter taught me something valuable, though I doubt they intended to. They showed me the difference between people who love you and people who love what you can give them. Real love doesn't measure your square footage and calculate renovation costs. Real love doesn't threaten you with medical evaluations when you disagree with their plans. Real love doesn't require you to diminish yourself to make others comfortable. I am 71 now, living in my chosen home, managing my own affairs, making my own decisions. I have friends who value my company rather than my assets, healthcare providers who respect my autonomy, and legal protections that ensure my wishes will be honored regardless of what anyone else thinks they should be. Most days, I barely think about Addison and Peter at all. But when I do, I feel something I never expected to feel about my own daughter: pity. They lost something that cannot be replaced or inherited: the chance to have a real relationship with someone who loved them unconditionally. They traded that for a fantasy of easy money and quick solutions, and in the end, they got neither. I, on the other hand, got something I never thought I would have again after George died: the knowledge that I can take care of myself, stand up for myself, and build a life that makes me happy. That is worth more than any inheritance they might have imagined. What do you think about my story? Have you ever had to deal with family members who seemed more interested in your assets than your well-being? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story helpful or eye-opening, please consider sharing it with others who might benefit from hearing it. Sometimes the most important thing we can do for each other is simply say, "You are not imagining things. You are not being paranoid, and you have more power than they want you to know."